All right, so welcome back to our next installment. We're very excited to invite esteemed creator, author, Robert Iveniuk to the show. So Robert, welcome. Nice to have you here.
Thank you. It's actually pronounced Iveniuk, but don't worry about that. Everyone gets it wrong. Like
Iveniuk.
As you can see, we've done our research.
It's particularly poor form because I'm part Ukrainian, so I should have been able to manage that one. But
I don't sweat it. You'd be surprised how many people get my last name wrong. Like it's been a constant throughout my life. People have gotten like the I and the U mixed up. You know, so sometimes I get Robert Iveniuk. It's like that's not even close, but fine. Like I just sort of roll with it, and I just very politely correct people as I go. So don't worry about it. It's just like a constant in my life.
Well, it's good to you get it sorted at whatever juncture that we can. So,
and now it's on the record.
Exactly, and the viewers they know. So okay, great. So yeah, thanks for coming on. What spurred this on is you've recently self-published, and so we're very excited to hear about that process, the self-publishing process, as well as creating process, the writing process, your journey to get to this point. So is there anything that you'd like to start with? Anything that you'd like to share with us?
Well, I guess like I should just do some quick introductions as to who I am. I've officially been an author since October 2011. Like I've always had a passion for writing, and I first got published in a small press magazine based out of Malta called Schlock Magazine. I've been sort of featured in a bunch of different things over the years. I wrote for blog.to for a while. I wrote for a local publication called Arch Enemy Magazine for a year or two. I've been in a bunch of different anthologies, and then and I'll get into why as I go, but from 2016, 2017 onward, I've been focusing more on working with local talent. So small press publishers or small press creatives here, and also just releasing stuff on my own. So I went from this gauntlet of submitting stuff to publishers to just sort of doing everything in-house right now.
Okay, so maybe tell us a little bit more about sort of what's behind that transition, and are you happy with how things have gone? Are you is the goal sort of to continue on sort of staying more local and potentially with more self-publishing, or is there some draw towards being able to be published by someone like more established?
Yeah, so I mean, I don't mind talking about it. So basically what happened was that in 2016, I sort of hit a creative choke point. It was actually when I first started. I should talk about the book, by the way, just real quick, because I have a copy here. I started working on this little novel called Olivia Zero back in late 2015, early 2016. I was scribbling out a bunch of notes on my ex-girlfriend's couch while she was sleeping in one day. And I had just sort of started like seeding this idea and really sort of building it out from there. And then what happened though was that in 2016, like at that point, I had already been in a bunch of different collections, as I said. Like I had been in 2 anthologies by Alchemy Press. I was in an anthology that Cross Genres Publications had released. I had just been accepted into Daily Nightmares' Quick Shivers About Bugs and Stories of Music by Timber Press LLC. But I was sort of hitting this period where I basically the long and short of it was that I was out of work. I was in an apartment where my rent went up twice because I got fitted with the bill for a bunch of repairs that were being done to the entire building. including for a parking garage I never used. So that was fun. And that girlfriend I was seeing and I went through a really tumultuous breakup. So I was in a really messy place, and some really shady friends were basically encouraging me to take this as an opportunity to pursue writing full time. And I kind of burnt out, and I just sort of hit a point where constantly trying to submit my stuff to different publishers and different people on even like just doing writing gigs on Craigslist and stuff. That was not bringing in the money I needed it to bring in, and it was not fulfilling. And I remember one of my former friends, who I don't talk to anymore because he's ridiculous. At one point he asked me, well, do you like writing or do you hate it? And I didn't know how to answer that, because my answer to both of those questions is yes. So for me, I was just like, do I even want to keep doing this? I'm not sure. But then, in 2017, I got roped in to be a copywriter for the Canadian Mental Health Association for about 6 months. And I started working a bit, like I sort of lost my fire for a bit. And then one of my friends roped me in to help him write a press release for a book that he was working on. And I guess that sort of started seeding in my head that, like, I still want to do this, but I don't want to go through what I went through before until I feel ready, or unless I have something that I really want to put out there. And I actually took some advice from my friend David Namisato, who recently worked on this graphic novel called Stealing Home, where basically what he said to me was, at the end of the day, just do it for yourself. So that's what I've been sort of doing for the past few years now, which is just, right now, writing is more of a me thing rather than a career thing.
Well, I think that's oftentimes the struggle is between the love of creating and then the necessity of life in terms of commercializing.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people glamorize being in the creative field, but there's a lot of logistical stuff that is not considered by a lot of people when they get into it. And especially when I started moving into self-publishing and like working on stuff with a lot of local talent, is just that question of, oh God, that's right, I need to find a printer, or, oh no, I need to set aside money to pay this artist, or I need to find places to, like, that'll willingly take copies of the book, or wherever. And, if you're like all these things where it's like, where do I set up? How do I set up? Like what type of paper I use? That can be really hard. And when you're a writer, it's especially really hard as well, because if you're a musician or a painter or an illustrator, people can tell within 10 seconds whether your stuff has any merit. If you're a writer, you got to hook someone from the first sentence, and you have to drag them through an entire article or short story or an entire novel. And then you have to like just keep that high going for as long as you can. So that can be a problem too.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Well, one of the things I could also manage, sorry, my voice, I'm a little bit sick, okay. Is the difficulty with music. People generally would want to listen to it. There's time for it. There's less competition. Writing, there's pretty much an infinite amount of books. Even picking like one of your authors, with the much spare time people have nowadays, it might take them like years to get through the back catalog, right? So convincing people to try something new who aren't your friends, I think would be a particular challenge. Have you thought about that, or ways of exposure?
Sorry, could I get the question, like, could I get the question real quick?
Actually, yeah, that was a bit, were you thinking about, because you mentioned this is sort of a labor of love, right? And I guess that means, were you thinking about exposure, or how are you going to get this book out there, or because you're mentioning the logistics you're thinking about, right? The artist. So obviously at some point you're probably thinking about, how am I going to get this book out there? You mentioned like some storefronts you're putting yourself on. Or does it not matter if it doesn't do great, right? You just want to get it out there, see where it goes, and maybe reorient for your next project.
Well, ultimately, I do want to get the money that I spent on this stuff back, right? So that is incredibly important. So obviously, yes, I do have to think about things like where the stuff is sold and how it's sold and how do I get the word out there that it is available. So like, for example, I actually dropped off a bunch of copies of this comic I worked on with John Berg, which is actually, it's 2 books. So it's actually we printed a bunch of these before the pandemic hit. And now I just have a closet full of the bloody things that I'm trying to, sell as much as I can. These little like Tales from the Crypt-esque stories that I did with him. And obviously that's really hard to do when you're in the middle of, a pandemic where it's a lockdown and then there isn't a lockdown and then there's a lockdown and then there isn't a lockdown. But I do try to, tag the stores, for instance, on social media, and just say, hey, I've got a couple of copies of the book at Eyesore Cinema. I've got a couple of copies of the books at Thunderstruck near Bloor and Spadina, and try to get the word out that way. I feel like LinkedIn has actually helped me out quite a bit with like promoting some of this stuff, because I don't really have a big social media presence anymore. I haven't used Tumblr in years, and I actually deactivated my Twitter account at the start of 2020 because I just had enough of that goddamn site. It was actually driving me insane. So with limited avenues to promote my stuff, I have to be a little more creative as to how I promote it.
So this is just as you were talking there, Robert, I thought about, I wonder, do you have a team or do you have colleagues or friends that assist you in this process?
Yeah, I mean, as far as I would say, I don't really have like an agent, and I don't really have like an official publisher per se, but I do have people who I work with who often promote my stuff. So the cover for Olivia Zero, for instance, was done up by the fantastic Rodrigo Bravo. And that book and the books I did with John Berg, I got printing assistance from Ricky Lima of Lime Press, who is a Brampton-based author and publisher who does a lot of his stuff in-house. So I sometimes get promotion through them. And John Berg has put pages from the books we've worked on his site. So I get some cross promotion from them, but generally speaking, I try to do a lot of this myself, which is a bit of a hassle. But I mean, but it does, you do see some of it. There's the fire.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, no, it's just because I know this is something that's more common for sort of projects that have a bigger budget, but like they're in terms of someone who could manage your social media, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Just putting it out there as a possibility, if you do have someone in your circles that might be inclined to do something like that.
I'd have to see. I mean, the thing is that I don't really have the money to have a social media manager right now. And I spend a lot of my money getting these books made. I mean, if I get some residuals from it or some extra money lying around that I'm not going to spend on reprints in the future, maybe I'll put something aside for, hiring an editor or something like that. But, for the moment, it's all just like me and the generosity of friends that are putting my stuff out there, yes. like Ricky and Rodrigo, John and whoever else.
Mm-hmm. Okay, nice. So let's tell us more specifically about Olivia Zero.
So Olivia Zero is a cyberpunk dystopian queer romance. Basically, the premise of the novel is that it takes place in this massive city-state that is essentially the last nation on Earth after the world had been ravaged by war and ecological disaster. The city itself is called the Hubs, and they are this interlocking series of little districts dedicated to specific aspects of keeping the society together. So there are agricultural districts that deal with food production. There's academy districts. There's production districts that deal with making clothes or toys or electronics or whatever. There's financial districts, and then there's major districts where all of the bourgeoisie and the elite live.
So Robert, just to jump in and be somewhat obnoxious, so you basically stolen the plot of Hunger Games and put a cyberpunk spin on it?
I swear to God. I didn't read Hunger Games until about a year or two ago. I actually didn't know.
Sounds very familiar.
A lot of these dystopian stories bleed together after a while. You have to find ways to mix and match like some of the fun angles.
There'll be no more interruptions. Please continue.
Goddamn right. Anyway, but no. So the ways that people are sort of held together in the hubs are through the whims of the Hub Prosperity Party, which is the main political overclass, and their assorted allies. A very oppressive police force called the Moderators, and through a social credit app called My Journey, where it basically ranks people in the society according to their subservience to the state and industry, how well they support other citizens, especially anyone who's of a higher rank than them. And people who have higher scores have higher statuses in society. I took inspiration from the Sesame credit system that China was testing back in 2014, 2015 or so. And then as I was working on this book, a Black episode mirror came out that basically had that similar idea. So I had to think about other stuff to make my setting a little more separate from that. So there's advanced AI, there's a certain degree of autonomy that's taken from ordinary people. When you get higher up in the ranks, for instance, you get private vehicle access, whereas if you need to drive anywhere, you basically need to hail down a cab. That's automatic, an auto cab that's driven by a machine, essentially. So my main character, Olivia Danzig, is an office worker who originally started off in an agricultural district and then basically worked her way up the ranks through a series of self-destructive work practices and sycophancy, landing her a 3,900 score. But something happens in the second or third chapter of the book where her score, she basically reports something to Public Works, and then an incident gets pinned on her negligence, and she ends up with a score of 0. And the Moderators say, if you want to reclaim your place in society, we're going to ship you off to this industrial district so you can work your way up from the bottom. And it's from there that she meets a churlish new companion who halfway through the story eventually becomes a love interest, and starts learning a bunch of things about the hubs and what actually happened to her. And then while all this is going on, there's also a revolution happening on the horizon that the news media has not been announcing. So she's got to figure out what the hell she has to do in the midst of all of this.
Okay, great. Yes, yeah, it's very sounds very interesting, Robert. So my next question is, how has your themes or inspirations, have they evolved over time? Like, is this a genre that you've always been interested in, or how's that played out?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think when I started off, my exposure to dystopian literature was, I guess, the same amount that other people had experienced over the years. It was 1984, it was Zamyatin's We, it was a lot of those old classics. And as far as exposure to cyberpunk stories go, like the ones that I mean, obviously I remember Blade Runner, I remember Ghost in the Shell, and the Takeshi Kovacs trilogy by Richard K. Morgan, which is a really hard series to recommend, by the way, because Morgan himself has announced some very dodgy political opinions in recent years. So as much as I like the books, I do say to people like, look, if you want to read them, you can, but maybe get them secondhand or something, or just borrow them from me. I don't know. But while I was working on this book, I ended up, I rewrote the ending and certain key parts of the story multiple times while I was working on it. And one of the things that I had to think about was, okay, I'm telling the story from the perspective of a lesbian, and I am a cis het man. So I need to, obviously there are like, many, women in my life, but I also need to see like, I need to see other stories that are from those perspectives. So I read stuff by Ellen Klages, and I'm sure I'm mispronouncing her name, and I'm sorry, Ellen. So Ellen Klages, Larissa Lai, Roxane Gay, Margaret Killjoy, Charlie Jane Anders, and several other women authors out there. One of my big influences that I discovered while I was working on this was Natsuo Kirino, who is a Japanese noir author who wrote the very, very excellent book Grotesque. And all that sort of fed into the novel as well. And I decided to look at other sci-fi stories as well, like of this particular genre or subgenre. So I eventually bit the bullet and picked up Snow Crash. And all that sort of fed into the story and sort of built it up. And also I was looking at things that were happening in society around us, the way that not only, the social credit thing that China was testing, but also I guess just the ways in which people get worked up in online spaces, like through Twitter or Facebook or wherever, and how people can get sort of emotionally manipulated. And that sort of fed into the book as well. I actually read a really excellent book called How Propaganda Works by Jason Stanley about 4 years ago. I can't recite most of it off the head, so you're gonna have to forgive me.
Is that from like the 60s or something?
No, it was actually a fairly recent book. But yeah, it basically looks at things like the ways that messages are sent out to people and how they're processed. So those are things that I sort of looked at while I was working on the book itself.
Great.
Justin, I just had a quick question, sort of burning then, if I may.
Sure.
So I like the fact that you're very like mindful of different groups, right? And I'm sort of curious about one more is cyberpunk is one of those genres that allowed to break gender normies down very easily. And the conversation around that has been sort of awareness is growing about the importance of like gender and respecting people's views. So as you're probably writing this book, society is becoming more aware. Did that inform, was that on your mind at all when you were writing this?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to be sort of aware of that sort of thing when you're addressing this, because especially because there are certain things like that get talked about in cyberpunk that are starting to become more and more real. I mean, we've already been modifying our bodies. I mean, I have a watch and I have glasses. So we already have been modifying our bodies with technology through all kinds of ways over the years. So, more things are starting to become a reality. Like, there's prosthetics that are becoming more readily available and way more advanced. And there's a lot of changes that are happening, with immunotherapy and stuff. And yes, those conversations about, sex and gender and everything else, like that has to be considered, especially when you're working on something like this.
Did your perspective change throughout the writing of the book, since it was a multi-year process? Because I feel like the boundaries or the conversations are becoming more helpful with more people expressing their views. Because what someone might thought is appropriate in 2016 is going to be maybe slightly different in 2019, just from their groups and reference groups.
Yeah. I would say that I wouldn't say that my views changed in the sense that maybe I did a full 180 on any of them, but I would definitely say that perhaps like some views that I had that I maybe had more of a nascent idea of sort of grew from there as I was working on this on this book, especially when I was doing my research and everything else, because oftentimes you hear people, online say stuff like, promote women authors and promote POC authors, but then no one actually lists anyone that they want like read, right? A lot of like sometimes you do see some book lists. So and it's also like, well, and I guess like perhaps when I was working on this and I was not exposed to as many lady writers, for instance, I was kind of going, yeah, that is important, but how different are the books? And then you actually pick it up and read it and you go, oh. So I would say that, yes, my views have sort of evolved over the past years.
And do you think that evolution, was it perhaps supported by this creating process? Do you think your views would have evolved in the same ways or at the same pace if, for example, you had been working on a different project or not working on the project at all?
I would say that it definitely helped. Yeah. I mean, it should not take, working on a book for me to seek out this information and develop it. But I would say that it certainly helped, especially because I had to be, feet deep in it. Right. I had to really sort of like put myself in the shoes of someone like Olivia Danzig. And I really had to think about certain things. So yeah, no, I would definitely say to that, that yes.
Okay. Great.
So one more burning one then. I guess you already answered this, Robert, but I just want to explore it for one more second.
Sure.
And so how much, I guess you obviously did your research, right? You didn't want to be inappropriate or disrespectful, but how much of an internal struggle was it to tell the story of a lesbian, and wondering if you have the right to tell that story?
Well, I think so. That's a really interesting question. I think that I have to be really mindful about that because there's been a lot of times where, cishet authors like me would have taken a queer character and, sometimes they've done really awful things with those characters. They've exploited their pain, or they've really sexualized them in really grotesque ways. So I absolutely, had to be really careful about the way that I sort of depicted Olivia, because obviously, she's living in a really oppressive society. So there's going to be some times when the ladder is being yanked out from under her. But I wanted her to have joy. I wanted her to have respite, which is why I ended up, turning her friendship with this person that she meets in the industrial district into a romance. Because, when you're in love with someone, obviously, the clouds part, and if it's a healthy relationship, you can really find common ground with each other. And there's definitely certain things that I added to the story, to basically just give her a break, because I didn't want to just keep, knocking the chair out from under her every couple of minutes or every few pages. So she has a sense of humor. She has things that she enjoys. She has a rapport. She has dreams. And I got a friend of mine to read the book. I have a friend who is quite openly gay, and I put it in front of her and I said, just so you know, main character is a lesbian. I hope I'm as respectful as possible. Let me know what you think. And when she finally read it, she texted me not long after saying, I love this. Where the hell is part 2, you rat bastard? So that was encouraging.
Definitely, it's always nice to get that feedback, especially after you've put in such a concerted effort to consider all variables, and you put in the hours, and so it's great to hear. So Lee, any final nagging questions?
Um, top of my head, actually, yeah, maybe if you wouldn't mind giving some advice. I think there's many people out there, including myself, who've often thought about it, right, in some capacity, right? But I think it's sort of daunting. Your first explanation did make it seem sort of daunting, but is there an easy, light path to like self-publishing, or is it just like too much of a hurdle for like a journeyman hobbyist?
I would say yes and no. So the yes part of that is it a hurdle? Yeah, absolutely, because you're competing with a bunch of other people out there with keyboards and messiah complexes who all think they're going to be the next Stephen King. And getting your name out there is going to be, a hassle. But it is also easier if you are a writer, because there are a lot of websites and services out there that you can use to promote your stuff. There's Wattpad, there's WordPress, there's fanfiction.net. There's all kinds of places where you can go to put your stuff out there. You can even like post stuff on Reddit, even if you're feeling brave enough, that you can release out there into the
Did
world.
you?
I am not brave enough for Reddit, but like I sort of feel like I'm testing my limits with putting stuff on WordPress. Every now and again, I'll get a comment and I'll think like, oh, this is it. I need to go shave my head and hide in the woods. But then it's always polite, and I go, oh, thank God. But yeah, no, like, I mean, so you need to be receptive to a certain degree of vulnerability. And you can start by putting yourself out there and giving people a sense of your voice. And that is how quite a few writers started. Like I remember Gail Simone, for instance, gained notoriety because she set up a website where she was talking about negative treatment, negative depictions of women characters in superhero comics. Talking about ways in which certain characters got depowered or killed off, or had really awful things happen to their characters for the sake of like development, or making a male character get motivated to fight the bad guy. And it sort of resonated with a lot of people. Obviously, I don't think that was the only thing she was working on, but that stuff can really help. And if it goes viral, then absolutely. So I would say to anyone who wants to get into the creative stuff, I 100% encourage it, but you need to be prepared to deal with a lot.
Thank you, Robert. That was very impactful advice. I'll just pass it off to Justin. I just want to wish you good luck and thank you for joining us for the kickoff of your media tour.
Well, thank you for kicking this off. I mean, it's got to start somewhere, and I can't think of a better place to start. So thank you guys for having me on. I really appreciate it.
No, it's been a pleasure for us. So just before we go, Robert, viewers who want to buy or they're interested in Olivia Zero, how can they get it?
So you can go to my Ko-fi page. My Ko-fi is Robert is Lost in the Wires. It's the main turnpike for all of my stuff. So the links to my WordPress page are also on there if people want to read my my insane posts about like pop culture and social issues and whatever. But the store is on there. If you go to the shop on the left-hand side of the main screen, there's a bunch of stuff there, not only for Olivia, but also PDFs of the comic I did with John Berg. There's a digital art project I did over the winter or early spring that I've got set up on there. So yeah, that is definitely the place to go if you want to get like a digital copy. As far as physical copies go, honestly, right now, I don't really have a way to ship stuff out to anyone. So if anyone is outside of the GTA and is looking for a book, I'm sorry that, you're going to be a little SOL for a while, but I will be letting people know if I'm going to be setting up shop at Word on the Street or at a storefront somewhere, or at a convention. And if you want to come say hi, come say hi.
Where will you be announcing that?
Sorry?
Where will you be announcing your locations?
I will probably either be announcing it on my Ko-fi or on my WordPress or on both.
Okay.
Excellent. So we'll provide those links in the description of this video. again, we really want to thank you, Robert, for coming on with us and sharing your experience, your insights, your process. We really have enjoyed it.
Thank you.
And
I hope I was coherent enough.
absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, Robert, Lee, thank you very much. We'll sign off for now, but viewers, look out for the description if you're interested. Just check them out and support our man, Robert.
Thank you very much.